series. I can't believe we're already here at the end of September, getting ready for the start of the new fiscal year. But for everyone who's tuning in, either live or via rebroadcast later, thank you for investing your valuable time. I hope you can find something of value in our conversation today. As you move forward in your efforts to do work that really matters, that has an impact for the clients you serve within Extension. And that includes fundraising and just becoming an even stronger leader. And I think that's something we're all trying to learn and grow toward. Today's session, which I've titled Resources and Reading Recommendations, which again, in retrospect, I probably could have made it a little snazzier. But you can think about this as a bit of an Easter basket. So when I was growing up, I grew up in Longmont, Colorado, in the foothills of the Rocky Mountains. And for whatever reason, my parents were big into Easter. So like we would have Easter baskets with like that plasticky like grass stuff, which as a sustainability professional now, I wonder like maybe there'd be like a biodegradable alternatives today. But that would have books, it would have candy, it would have like Easter eggs. And so there was always like this excitement of everybody's basket is different and unique. So this is my Easter basket for all of you. Some of the ideas and recommendations may repeat from past sessions you've been a part of. I've also tried to inject some fresh material in here, and you'll find a combination of book recommendations, tools that I'm using or seeing others of my clients use. And then just as Melanie mentioned, mindsets, right? I think that's probably the biggest piece that too often gets overlooked because we get so focused on seeking that next round of funding, successfully executing a grant that we actively are managing, and then all of the other steps that happen in between. We can lose track of the bigger picture, right? Who are we becoming as extension professionals? Who are we becoming in terms of the impact, the benefits that we're providing to society? And so those are the kinds of things I hope my ideas and recommendations will help you with today. I'm also going to put this back on you a bit because today's session is probably the most interactive in the sense that I'm going to have more questions than normal for all of you, because I think one of the powerhouse benefits of working within the extension system is just the mind share that you have as an organization, right? You have such talent, such depth of experience, applied research, a diversity of disciplines, areas of expertise. And so I hope to bring that out for the benefit of all of you and your peers, but also, frankly, selfishly for me, because I want to hear from you and learn from you. So that's what we're going to do today. Really, I want you to be able to maybe take one or two ideas from this, add it to your recommended reading list, go check out a tool and experiment with it. And again, I want to hear your ideas as well. Toward the end of our meeting today, we'll have a couple of quick surveys, one for Extension Foundation. I want you to prioritize that one. And then I'll also have a little QR code toward the end if you can give me some quick feedback on today's session and again, the series overall, how helpful it's been to you and maybe ways I can add value in the future. I would be so grateful. All right, let's go ahead and dig into today's material. And I'm going to try to use getting this little weird pointer thing here. Let's see. How do I not have that? Give me 1 second here. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and try again. I'm not sure what Zoom is doing today, but it's going to be okay. There we go. Okay, I apologize. That was on my end. So 3 learning objectives for today's session. Number 1, I mentioned game-changing books. These are things that have helped me, and the principles I see taught in these books are principles that I see in effectively led academic settings, nonprofits, which is the audience I serve most closely, etc. So I hope this can be helpful, and I'll try to articulate as we go through some of these examples how it can be applied, first to fundraising, but then to other aspects of the work that you do in Extension. Then toward the end of our session today, I'll share some resources and tools. Again, some of them you may have heard about before on these sessions or outside of this. Others hopefully will be new or something you can try. And then finally, I want you to learn from each other. And so I'll try to inject some questions as we go along that you all can share with each other, starting with this slide. So at this stage of your extension career, what are you most excited to be actively learning about? Now, here's why I'm asking this question. As I shared earlier, oftentimes we sort of rush forward because we're busy people, we're executives, we're leaders, we're managers. But I want you to take a step back and think about, what are you actively learning about today? I think it's interesting. There have been a lot of high profile books published this year. Go on your favorite bookseller and Google, being an active learner. I know David Novak from my land grant university, University of Missouri, recently published a book about being an always on learner. This is important because I think creativity stems from learning, right? Experiencing the world, being curious. And so go ahead and type into the chat if you would, like, what are you learning about? It could be specific to the clients you serve in extension. It could be totally unrelated, but something that you just have a passion for. So I'll take a minute and pause. What are you learning about at this stage of your career in extension that you're really excited about? All right, I'm seeing some comments in the chat. I love it. Thank you. So, okay, Lissy, sustainable buildings and growing in greenhouses. Oh, that's so interesting to me because most of my career has been spent in outdoor ag, right? Row crops, livestock. But the indoor space is so interesting to me, and I know next to nothing. So that's really cool. Natalie, learning about my community and its needs. Absolutely, that is so awesome. That'll serve you so well in your role. Sarah, certification manual development. Nancy, pardon me, AI. Katie, food systems and food resiliency, new ways to be sustainable. Love it. That's my sweet spot. Um, Scott, foundations and research behind positive youth development and how we can best serve youth. Yes, I mean, we've never had more tools available to us. And so many young people so energized to make a difference in the world. So I love that focus. Suzanne, brand new. Welcome to the extension community. I'm excited to have you here. Building community partnerships. John David, how community groups can best work together. Yes, I love that. Helping your clients collaborate more effectively and get things done. That's fantastic. I would say for me, and I've probably shared this before, I continue to be fascinated by artificial intelligence. I think it just has such tremendous power for any professional, but especially for academics and nonprofits, just finding greater efficiency, getting, for relatively low cost, some really great insights that can enhance the work you're already doing and boost it. I know it's boosted my organization. So again, there are lots of other things I'm curious about in history and other topics, as I'm sure is true for you all. But I'm excited to hear all the things you're learning about. Very quickly, I think most of you know me by now. I spent my early career in consumer-facing media, working for organizations like the Wall Street Journal, excuse me, the Detroit Free Press, and doing a little freelance for Washington Post and Fast Company and others. Then spent a lot of my career in B2B media, primarily in food and agriculture, and for the last couple of years have been leading this consulting firm, Silver Maple Strategies, focusing on fundraising and communication strategy. So again, very passionate about the work of extension. I'm a two-time extension council volunteer, and again, really excited to be with you today. So as you start to think about your own professional development within extension, I want to encourage you with a reminder that you are a multifaceted human being, right? Hopefully this is not new to you, but I've been spending a lot of the last 12 months or so on mindfulness and, getting to know me, which can seem a little woo-woo, but in fact, I think there's a lot of value, right? Stepping back outside of your day-to-day work and really reflecting on, okay, what value do I bring? Like, who am I? If I were out of the equation, right? If I'm not part of extension, if I'm not part of this community, how does the world look different? And too often we discredit the value that we bring, right? Your individuality, your expertise, your passion, the way you engage the world is very uniquely you, and a machine can't replicate that. They can mimic it, but they can't be you. And so I want you to remember that. And for me, I think about it in a few dimensions, right? Certainly you're an extension professional, right? You're here, your chances are very good that you're very passionate. You have deep subject matter expertise. You care a lot about helping people. You care about making the world and your community stronger. Not just sort of hypothetically, but you're actually taking steps that genuinely change people for the better every day. Second, you might be an educator or a specialist or a researcher, right? So you have specific subject matter expertise and an ability to help people in unique ways based on your training, your education, and your world experience. You're also a fun seeker and project implementer at some level, probably, or I doubt you would have signed up for a fundraising focused webinar series. So you care about actually being able to sustain the impact that you're having, right? And part of that is financing. And you also care about actually doing a great job once you get that funding in the door, so you can hopefully, help as many people as possible and continue that progression into the future. The last one may strike you as funny, but I actually think it's very applicable to extension. Think of yourself like an entrepreneur running multiple small businesses, right? If you have colleagues you collaborate with, or a team, even a small team, right? Half of a person or one person, you're a manager, right? You're a leader. If you are providing communications, right? Either articles or newsletter content, or you're public speaking, training, teaching, you're an educator, you're a thought leader, you're a communicator. You are also responsible likely for managing money on some level, whether that's fundraising or administering budgets. And so in many respects, extension represents true entrepreneurs who are in charge of their, local area, a dedicated budget, dedicated resources, but you're also cross-functional, right? You're working across likely other facets of extension. You're collaborating deeply with your local community, which might look like municipalities, nonprofits, businesses, and families. And again, I don't know many other entities, nonprofit, for profit, or otherwise, that have sort of that depth of service that you provide. And so I think you should be really proud of that. And I think knowing that, you should step into it and say, okay, how can I become even better? Or I'm curious about, X or Y. Let me sort of skill up on that. And that's what these resources today are designed to help you do. Um, and the more you can study and gather ideas that inspire you, number one, right, that give you the motivation to keep going, and then power your work because they make you more productive, more creative, more efficient, a better leader. You're just going to compound your own personal and career growth, but you're also going to compound the impact that extension is able to have. Okay, Harry Truman said this, as best I can tell. I know not all quotes you find on the internet are reliable, but the quote goes, not all readers are leaders, but all leaders are readers. So again, I think the concept here is very true. And, as I mentioned, I grew up in Colorado, and my parents would take us to the Tattered Cover bookstore in downtown Denver. I think there are now at least a couple of different outlets of that nature. But just absolutely fell in love with books, and I suspect many of you at some level are enthusiastic readers as well. So again, this applies also, though, to podcasts and videos and any type of learning you can get your hands on. I highly encourage it. Okay. I'm going to give you some recommended reading, and after each of these books, I'm going to pose a question, so get ready to jump into the chat. Soundtracks by Jon Acuff. This one came out within the last 2 years or so, and I really like this book as a heuristic or a tool for getting out of your head. Too often, whether you're an extension professional or someone like me, a small business owner, it can be very easy to be distracted, right? There are often sobering and sad things happening in the news. There are challenges in the workplace, right? Conflict with colleagues. It could be budgetary challenges. It might be your family struggling with whether with health or with the loss of a loved one or with your finances. And so, soundtracks, I think, speaks to this idea that too often we are our own worst enemy. And we talk to ourselves in ways that are unproductive, right? Maybe not out loud, although I actually do talk out loud a fair amount to myself. Judge me if you will. But it can be helpful to sort of reconsider the stories we tell ourselves. I think Brene Brown used that phrase, the stories we tell ourselves. But anyway, soundtracks is this idea that Jon Acuff talks about in the book. When you talk to yourself about how things are going with an extension, right? How is this project going? Am I excited or depressed by what I'm finding in terms of available funds? The framework that John talks about throughout this book is it true, right? Is the thing that I'm telling myself actually legitimately, is it based in reality? Is it kind, right? Is it a nice thing? Is it making me feel better? Is it giving me more energy to do this? Or is it tearing me down? And is it helpful, right? Is the story, the conversations I'm having in my head that maybe nobody else knows about on my team but me, is it actually helping me do my best work, be at my best? Is it encouraging me? Is it showing self-compassion? Or is it completely destructive, which too often is the case? And so, if you read nothing else on the list that I'm going to share with you today, I think Soundtracks is both funny, approachable, and one of the most practical books I've ever read. And it has application for any facet of your life, but I think especially for extension or any academic entity or nonprofit, you're doing really meaningful work, purpose-driven work under some very challenging situations. And so, those tend to be the kinds of pressure cooker settings that cause us to be at our worst mentally. And in turn, when our mental health is challenged, then all of our relationships are collateral. And I know you don't want that. I don't want that for you. So think about, this book. Again, he's not a psychiatrist or a psychologist or anything like that, but he is, an entrepreneur, someone whose goal is to help people be at their best. And so he talks a lot about goals in his other writing. But again, Soundtracks to me is his best work to date. Okay, so now I'm going to turn the tables and ask you all, help us build our respective reading lists, right? So what's something you're actively reading? And I put book here, but honestly, it could be a Substack or a YouTube channel or what have you. Like, let's get creative here. Something you're studying right now or reading or engaged with that you're like really enthusiastic about. I would love you to drop something in the chat just so we all are able to benefit from the great things you're finding out there. So I'll stop for a minute, take a drink, and check out the chat. Excellent. So I'm seeing some great recommendations in the chat here. I see decolonizing methodologies, social emotional ethical learning certificate. Awesome. I love, anytime you can do like professional development or certification training, those can be so powerful just for cementing that knowledge. And again, getting credit for the expertise that you bring. That's awesome. The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander. Absolutely. The Bible. Fantastic, Judith. Thank you. Everything hydroponic related. I love it. Like drilling down into a specific niche. We'll actually talk about a book related to that idea of digging in a moment. Love that, Lissy. Tracy, I see that your comment. Oh, think again. That's been on my list, Amanda. Thank you for raising that. Katie, The Art of Gathering. That one I have not heard, but that sounds awesome. Excellent. These are great. So please feel free. Keep throwing those recommendations in the chat at any point during our session today. Oh, Crucial Conversations. I feel like I've read that one and it was really good. Thank you for sharing that. Hanjun. Okay, so with that said, obviously you all are very engaged. You're actively learning and growing your own knowledge and experience, so I love that. I'm going to dive into another book, and again, please feel free to keep jumping in, ask questions, add recommendations. Free to Focus by Michael Hyatt. So the previous book I mentioned because if you are going to be actively fundraising and building your impact through, securing financing, doing great work, etc., you have to have your mind in the right place and constantly nurture that, right? It's not like you can have a good mindset and then just leave it alone, because when you leave it alone, things start to fall apart, right? I love like the Halloween season myself, and so like driving by spooky abandoned houses that have ivy growing all over them for me is like really cool. But the reality is that house is no longer functional, right? Nobody can live there, and we want you to stay around with us and to be at your best, right? Mentally and physically, emotionally. So start with Soundtracks. Next, Free to Focus is valuable because one of the perennial challenges I hear in my clients and across, any entity that seeks grants or funding is that I simply don't have enough time. I don't have time. I don't have the people. When I do have the time, I'm completely burned out of energy and I can't even think about it. So I think Free to Focus is a really nice place to start with a framework for really honing in on what is the top priority, like what is the thing that I personally, based on my expertise, my capacity, everything on my plate, what do I need to focus on first? And so it's about figuring out, okay, if you have someone you can delegate to, how do you even go about figuring out what to delegate, right? And sometimes that's not possible. So then it's a matter of, okay, how do I really drill into what is the highest value that I can bring? Michael Hyatt's company is called Free to Focus, former CEO of Thomas Nelson Publishers, and has since gone on, along with his many of his family and other people, to develop products and resources, including the oh goodness, is it Focus on This? They have a really great podcast as well that I highly recommend if you're not quite ready for the book yet. I was just listening. Their podcast has been rebranded. It's called The Double Win, with Michael Hyatt and Megan Hyatt Miller. But Free to Focus, again, sort of walks you through this framework for how do you actually start to parse out of everything on your plate, how do I do the work that I need to be doing, and sort of move away from the distraction heavy culture that we live in. Again, it's going to take some time to soak on, because I know when I'm exposed to content like this for the first time, I can be a little resistant, right? Like, okay, this sounds great in a hypothetical scenario where all of my existing projects are put on hold and I can just have, a time to go to a meditation retreat and think deeply about these things. But the reality is, an extension, you are in the moment. You're not on a retreat, although I know you take retreats and do lots of professional development, which I commend because many don't. Nonetheless, like, getting out of the day-to-day can be really tough. But this is a good place to start, along with the Double Win podcast, just starting to think about this. And then as you go through this, I'm not making any money from this, but I have in the past, not currently, used the Full Focus Planner, which basically takes the system that's described in this book and gives you a physical paper version to sort of go day to day and say, okay, these are my big 3 things I'm focused on this week and today. And again, there's a whole system you can go through. I have totally not mastered it, but I think some of the principles are very valuable for really making sure that when it comes to fundraising, you're able to dedicate the time it deserves, because you all know better than I do, these things take time. No matter how many AI tools and things like that you throw at it, again, maybe that will change in the future. I'm hopeful that it will. But again, these things take time and brain power. And so this can be a good system for starting to free up your creative thinking about how you might be able to do that without burning yourself to the ground. Okay, so that's book number 2. Let me pause and ask, what's the most important lesson that you've ever learned from a book? Now, again, I'm going to be broad here. It may not be a book. It may be a mentor. It may be something you read or something you watched. But I'm curious about a really important lesson as you've been going through this personal career growth and learning on your own. What's something that really profoundly changed you? Like, if you were to think back on the highlights of your career, you could point to that and say, that's when I started to change this aspect of who I am or how I show up or what I do. So I'll pause for a moment, and then I'll dive into the chat and see what folks have to say. As you're thinking about something that was really transformational in terms of something you learned that changed how you act, I'll give my example. So years ago, when I was in journalism school, there, as you know, when you're in college, like, there are all kinds of internships and opportunities, and some of it you may have had like a really clear direction. Like, I thought I wanted to be in the newspaper industry, which I love newspapers, but today, if you look at the economics, it's not the brightest picture. Although I think there's some exciting innovation happening. But nonetheless, I wanted to be a reporter at a big newspaper like the New York Times. And so I had a really great mentor, a professor who taught copy editing. And he said, hey, I think you should apply for this internship. And I can't recall if I'd heard about it or not. But he was like, hey, I really think you should do this. And that, applying for that, launched me onto, getting to go intern with a major newspaper, and future opportunities to do paid work in college, which, kind of helped pay the bills and open new doors that I would never have imagined in a million years. So that's not a book per se, that's a person. But I think we can look back at those moments when we're trying to learn and figure things out, and you're kind of vacuuming things up. And it's really exciting. So I guess what I'm sharing that story because what you read, the messages that I'm about to read in the chat, you're going to have more moments like that in the future, assuming you continue to invest in your own learning, your own growth. And so don't view this as like time you should be spending doing X or Y. Regular, progressive little bites of learning can pay off in huge ways that you can't even see today. So just a note of encouragement. Okay, so some awesome thoughts here in the chat. Let me go through these. So Suzanne says, wherever you are, be all there. Yes, I can't tell you how many times I struggle with being present. Not just at work, but with my children, right? Because when you're with your family, you should be thinking about family, but oftentimes your mind is somewhere else at work, for example. So yeah, I love that advice. Becky, you found the career for you when you feel guilty getting paid to do it because you enjoy it so much. I love that one. That's awesome. Um, Amanda, don't accept criticism from someone you wouldn't seek advice from. Oh wow, I've had some really great learning moments on that one. I could talk for hours about that topic. Yes, like seek out feedback eagerly, right? It's painful to hear sometimes, but make sure that when you do it, you're talking with someone who you respect, right? Number one, which I think is what you've raised, and something that they actually have proficiency to comment on, right? Everyone can have an opinion, but a very targeted group of people can have an opinion that counts on the topic you care about. So really, really good point. Let's see, Judith, rereading something I read before from a different angle. Yes, isn't it amazing that when we go back and read something, we find totally new insights that were unfamiliar to us before, right? I think part of that is like getting older and just having more experience. Part of it is just the frame of mind you were in when you read it. And then part of it, I think, is serendipity. Love that. Isabel, not to take general narratives as fact, seek out different perspectives. Yes, absolutely. That's a really, really great point. And I'm trying to think about the book. Well, I'll think of it later, but there's a book I'm reading right now about the history of Native American indigenous peoples in America. And the whole book is incredibly researched history by a Yale historian. And 99% of the events in that book I've never heard about. And it goes exactly to what you're saying here of the narrative has left out so much vast millennia of history that we have, neglected. And so I'm really happy to see you raising that point as well. Seeking out perspectives, really digging deeper and challenging even your own beliefs can be so important. Thank you for sharing that. Okay. A few more book recommendations and then we'll move into tools. I think that Atlas of the Heart, Brene Brown in general, I think is brilliant. I'm sure many of you are very familiar with her work as a licensed social worker, as someone who talks a lot about vulnerability, courage, leadership. And I'll admit, this is one that I have not made all my way through, but in just the first, let's say 50 to 100 pages, I was just blown away by this book because number one, it's a beautifully printed book if you get the physical copy. It's a little, I think it's on the pricier side, but it's I would say highly worth the investment. I actually got it from my local library. So shout out to libraries. But this volume is great because I think it's very easy as a leader or someone who's going after fundraising when you're having to assemble the people who are going to put together a grant proposal. It's very easy to get into the zone of, okay, everyone rally, these are the tasks we have to do. These are the deliverables or the outputs that we have to build. I'll go do this, you go do that, and we'll meet back together and get this thing submitted and out the door. What that neglects to, it underemphasizes the humanity of the people doing the work, right? We are not artificial intelligence. We're not machines. We are, biological and spiritual beings who have feelings, emotions, experiences, challenges, areas of expertise. And so what I like about this book is that it really challenged my thinking on the depth and the variety of emotional experiences that exist for human beings. And it really articulates in a research-based way, what do we mean by grief or loss or joy or courage or fear or anxiety? And again, emotions that I had never considered, but I found myself like nodding and being like, I felt this, but I never had language for it. And so I think it's really tremendous resource to get to understand your own emotional landscape, but also especially when it comes to leadership within extension, working with others. I just can't say enough good things about this book. I thought, again, and it can be, I would say pace yourself, right? This is one of those books that it may hit you pretty hard and deep, and you may need to just spend some time, like maybe days or weeks at a time, just reflecting on something, like thinking about your own experience. And now that you're able to better see something in yourself, you can also begin to think about how you can serve others if they're going through something that may reflect what you find in the book. So again, emotions are and emotional intelligence far underrated. Again, I think there's a lot of work that's happening to publicize this and make it a priority in leadership. Um, but again, I spend some time with this book. If this topic is at all of interest to you, I think you'll find it very valuable. Okay, so pause for a question. What do you consider the best resource or resources for learning how to work with other people, right? So when it comes to grant funding, implementing a grant project, doing your day-to-day work in extension, you work with people, right? You work with your clients, you work with administrators, you work across other extension disciplines and areas of expertise. So how have you learned to work better with other people? I'm very curious your thoughts, and I'm being agnostic as to the platform you were able to gain that insight from. So drop some thoughts in the chat, and then we'll talk about those here in a moment. And if you want to actually speak up and say something verbally, I am very game for that. So please just raise your hand, and we can call on you as well. Yeah, listening. I see Karen wrote in the chat. Thank you. I love that. You know, it often is. We often jump to conclusions, right? But the reality is that we are terrible predictors of what people are thinking. I am, I think I'm an Enneagram 2, which if anyone's on the Enneagram, um, emotion and emotional intelligence is really big for me. But the flip side of the Enneagram 2 is that we can also assume too much, right? Oh, I know how they're feeling. Actually, you don't. So listening, so important. So thank you for sharing that. Um, let's see here. What else do we have? Practice. Yes, absolutely. Practice. I don't agree that practice makes perfect, but practice makes progress, right? Love that, Kitty. Shelby, listen to understand rather than listening to respond. Yes. Man, how many times have I found myself thinking through the response to someone before they even finished speaking? So it's a great reminder to just pause and quiet your mind and listen. Um, let's see here. What else? Cultivating collaborative leadership skills. Awesome. A book you're not listening. Thank you, Hun Yun, and I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. Please let me know how to if I'm not. But you're not listening. What you're missing and why it matters. That sounds fantastic. I will definitely add that to my list. Humility, being able to remove your own bias as best as possible during any engagement and put your curiosity first to really connect. I love that. Humility is so important. Knowing what you don't know, knowing when to be quiet, right? Just listen. Samantha, I'm very involved in community engagement. Living in a small town is really nice. It's close knit, so I have opportunities to bump into people, which has helped build so many relationships. This has helped me promote our extension activities and drum up interest. Yes, I love that. And again, extension, and you're speaking to this, you're so much closer to your community than so many other types of professionals. And so building that relationship, working and living on site of people can really be profound in shaping how you talk to people, how you best help them. I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. Okay, so a couple more books and then we'll move on to some tools. Thank you all for participating, by the way. This is fantastic. I love hearing from you. Um, you can't know it all. So this one's a few years old by now, within the last, let's say, 5 to 7 years. Wanda T. Wallace writes about how do I, in a very complex world where we have artificial intelligence was around obviously then, but not to the degree we have it today. But there's so much depth of expertise, right? People with walking around with PhDs in any topic under the sun. And as a leader or someone who's fundraising and trying to bring together extension experts, land grant university researchers, external partners in the private sector, you could spend multiple lifetimes trying to learn everything those partners and colleagues and experts know, but that's impractical, and would you want to do that, right? You want to focus on the things that bring you joy and that fall into your area of expertise. So this book talks a lot about how do you function in an environment where so many people are experts. How do you manage that process? And so I think this is just a great, again, framework for being credible, being humble to the point that was raised earlier in the chat, and really making progress on big initiatives, big projects, fundraising, what have you. Um, and so I really appreciated that. I think another book I've mentioned in the past on this series is Who Not How by Dan Sullivan and Benjamin Hardy. That book really focuses a lot on this idea that you don't have to go out and become an expert in any topic you care about. What you need to do is find an expert in the material that will help you get to the next level, right? Whether it's in your career or for a specific fundraising opportunity. Like, find the person. Don't study up and try to become the expert in the topic. Get to know the people who can really accelerate your learning curve. So really powerful concept and a really interesting book that I recommend to you. So on that point, my next question for you is, when things get complex or hard, as things are wont to do in any industry, including extension, where do you turn for clarity and wise counsel? You don't have to name specific names, although you're certainly welcome to if you feel comfortable doing so. But, is there a type of leader or a friend or a resource that you turn to really help you sort things out? For me, while you all are thinking and typing into the chat, for me, it's my business coach, right? Ed is, very talented. He's further along in his career, so he has more expertise. He's seen what works and what doesn't in terms of building a services-based business and helping clients in a way that's meaningful. And so, I love that. I mean, other examples would be your spouse or a good friend or a partner, right? I think there's lots of sources, and I think many times we get into a rut of, I've got to figure this out on my own. But oftentimes there are people in our corner if we would just ask them, right? Um, let's see here. Lillian says, practicing empathy and not being judgmental. I love that idea. Yes. Just, putting yourself in others' shoes, understanding that you can't live someone else's experience, but you are there to be a witness, to be a listener, to be a sounding board, to be empathetic. I think that's so important. Shelby says, my little sister is sort of the go-to person when things get complex. Works in extension in another state. She's my favorite sounding board. I love that. And I love the fact that, number one, your family, right? Your siblings. Number two, I love that you're both in extension, so you can kind of share different perspectives on what works here, what works there, like where are the similarities and differences. And I think that really encourages divergent thinking, right? Okay, what can I try from someone else that maybe needs to be turned 90 degrees here to be effective? John says, trust a well-facilitated group discussion. Yes, absolutely. Extension has tons of really talented facilitators. And, getting someone in the room who's dispassionate, who helps make sure everyone gets a chance to talk, can really be eye-opening. So I love that. Thank you, John. Okay, great. Okay, I will come back to the chat, I promise. As we round the bend on the last 30 minutes or so together, got a couple more books to share. This is the final book slide, and then I'll get to resources. Digital minimalism is one that I've read, and candidly, Slow Productivity I have not read, but it is on my list, and it's near the top for reasons I will share. Cal Newport is a researcher. He's an academic. I think he's both brilliant and very approachable, both in how he shows up in podcast interviews, which are numerous. I highly recommend going and checking out. I think he was on Andrew Huberman's show not too long ago, and many others sort of running the circuit as he publishes new material. So what I love about Cal Newport's writing and advising is that he is very focused on how do you do your best work in a way that is almost countercultural, right? Because we have so many devices and distractions today, which is really what digital minimalism addresses, right? He talks about his own experience with distraction and how to both live in a world that's empowered and made better by the technology we have, while also recognizing that that technology has its limitations, right? It can steal our attention. It can limit our ability to focus and do our best work. So I highly recommend, with fundraising, again, time crunches are really, really common. Grants also require tons of deep work, thinking and writing and rewriting to be at your best. And so a lot of the distractions we have in our world today are running counter to that. And so if you're finding it very difficult to get yourself or your team on board with doing this kind of deep work, digital minimalism may be one way to support that process of like decoupling yourself on purpose so that you can be at your best when you're doing this kind of very focused work. Slow productivity, I love this idea because one of the challenges I see a lot of my nonprofit and academic clients having is that they're running so fast. Um, and and I do, again, I've done this for years in my work and had to like train myself and continue to train myself. Um, Hustle and speed does not equal quality, right? Um, and I think we see that in the fact that we are finally prioritizing sleep, right? We burn ourselves out. We burn the candle at both ends, so to speak, and then we're not at our best. Why? Because we didn't take the time to rest, which is what our body needs to recuperate. In a similar way, we can rush through like lots of checklists and to-do lists, but we may not be making the kinds of progress that's going to get the best results for our clients and for the extension system. Um, and that's not helpful to anybody, including you. So again, I'm excited to read Slow Productivity. Heard a lot. I've heard him speak about the book and the content at length, so I feel qualified to say, hey, I think it's probably worth a few hours to invest in this material. I certainly plan to do so. Okay, so book section, that's a wrap. My question for you now is, what are some strategies you use to minimize distractions and maximize productivity without burnout? I mean, maybe not without burnout, it's the wrong word, but to minimize or mitigate the risk of burnout. So I'd love for you to drop in a tip or a strategy you find effective to do great work without some of the corresponding drama. So while you're thinking about maybe things that you do to mitigate distractions, one of my favorites, well, a couple things. I have an iPhone, so I like the do not disturb mode. I also really like airplane mode, um, which renders me unable to receive phone calls. For some reason, text messages sometimes slip through, but not often. So again, just simple little one click of the button to just keep people at bay for a few hours can be really helpful. Um, I'm trying to think of other ideas. I'm going to look it down in here. Let's see. So Kitty says, I'm not very good at this, but a goal is to check email twice per day. I love that. Um, and I will build on that and say, I think it's great. Like maybe in the morning and in the evening before you close out for the day. That's awesome. I love that. Um, I recently took the step, which like, I had the sinking feeling. I actually took email off of my phone, which for me was like a monumental shift in how I think, but it's definitely forced my hand in terms of, okay, how often am I checking email while still being available and making sure all the work gets done. Kaylee saying no. Yes, so important, but so hard. I love that. Katie using focus modes on my phone, leave creative time in the morning, consumption time in the afternoon. Ooh, I love that. Yeah, understanding your own like biological clock and your working preferences, right? Do I have more energy in the morning or in the afternoon? Or is it cycle through? And then building your workday to correspond to that, I think is really, really critical. I love that. Um, Tracy, stop answering emails not related to the project. Yes. I forget who I read this from first, but when you send an email, you ultimately create more email for yourself, right? So being diligent in what you respond to and when, game changer. Samantha, I need all the help I can get. Yes, I think we all do. Samantha, you're not alone. Melanie says, really important to get outside during the day and take breaks, short walks, or at least getting some fresh air. Oh man, it's so important. Sunlight, all of those things, Melanie, absolutely. Crystal, I'm all over the place. Crystal, you're not alone. Appreciate the tips for sure. Let's see, Shelby, office meetings twice a day to check in and keep each other updated on schedules. Yeah, I love that. I think one thing I see across every sector is people doing meeting, like feeling like a meeting has to be full 30 minutes or full 60 minutes or heaven forbid a half day of nothing but meeting. And oftentimes you can be more productive with a really strong agenda and a 5-minute check-in, right? Maybe even a couple times a day. So I love that idea. Lillian, the Pomodoro method, I've heard really good things about that. And some variation and only using the rest time to be distracted from the work that needs more attention. Really, really great to sort of put a pattern interrupt to get yourself thinking differently. Yeah, scheduling time for innovative and creative thinking, Melanie. I love that. Scheduling calendar time just for you, and just investing it, right? That's awesome. Love that. And Samantha gives shout out to Melanie. So thank you. Those are great ideas. Um, so let me pause there. If there are any questions or other comments, please drop those into the chat. We're going to go ahead and transition into the tools and resources section. And while we're doing that, Melanie, at any time, if you want to drop in the survey, please feel free to do that. I know we're getting close to the top of the hour and some people may have to drop. So if you want to drop in that survey at any point, please feel free to do so. And folks, if you don't mind filling that out, I know Melanie would really be grateful. Okay, thank you. Very awesome. That's great. I love the sharing that's happening in the chat. Thank you so much. Um, okay, so we're now going to move into the sort of tools and resources section. And again, some of this will recap things we've talked about previously in this series. Some of it may be new. I've tried to include things on here that I've personally used or have enough experience with that I've said, oh, that's actually something that could be helpful to you. Um, and feel free to drop questions or clarifications into the chat, and we'll be sure to leave some time at the end for Q&A. So I'll just go through these kind of rapid fire. Top left-hand corner box. So these are a few tools that can take any document and turn it into audio, or vice versa, right? Audio into text. So if you're like me, like you don't always want to sit and read a dense tome, PDF on your computer or something like that. So there are some really nice resources out there for you, and these are a couple. I'm actually searching in the background for one more that I learned about today. I'm trying to remember the URL. I think I found it. Okay. So Speechify is an app you get for your phone. You can get a paid subscription. I think it's pretty modest, under $100 a year. And Speechify is fantastic because, sometimes you listen to an app with AI features and the AI sounds like a robot. They've actually invested a lot of, in professional voice actors as well as AI that sounds relatively conversational. And so, like, for example, when I was going through grant writing certification, I would upload like materials from my grant writing course, 30-page Word documents, and have it read through to me so I could, when I'm in the car or, doing what have you, I could be continuing to sort of process the material. It has the ability to actually click into specific paragraphs or text and, repeat items. Occasional glitches, but for the most part, I found it really strong. And it also integrates with Dropbox, Google Drive, so you can get connected to all of the places where you store files and quickly upload things. So it's very user-friendly. Otter AI, I love Otter on my desktop specifically. So this is a tool that I use, like if I'm recording a podcast interview, for example, or if you have a video and you want to get a written transcript, you can upload that file, the audio file or what have you, to Otter and get a very quick written transcript. One application I'm experimenting with that I'm really finding powerful is using Otter to transcribe my voice and think things through. So I tend to be like, I type pretty fast, but I tend to think faster than I type. And so I have found this helpful in basically narrating, okay, I'm going to put together a project proposal. Or you could think about it like, hey, I'm putting the project narrative together for this grant. I'm going to talk through these topics and basically make yourself a little cheat sheet. So you could say, I'm going to talk about the history of our extension. I'm going to talk about the sort of precedent of projects we've done like this. Then I'm going to talk about the new project we're proposing. I'm going to talk about how it's going to be structured, et cetera, et cetera. And then what you do is go through that outline and talk it out, right? And if you like, you can be as raw as you like, or you can make it pretty like as you might read it if you were reading out loud as a grant reviewer. I love that methodology. It's actually saved me a ton of time just getting an initial brain dump on paper. Then what I do is take and place that into ChatGPT, or you could use Gemini or Anthropic or whatever other AI tool you like, and get it to clean up all your text, make it legible, take out all the ums and uhs and all that kind of stuff. And so basically what I'm using it for is a time-saving device, a device that helps me get my thoughts on paper faster and ideate more rapidly, right, to get a product out the door. So something to consider. Another tool that I learned about today is called Notebook LM from Google. And I'm going to drop this in the chat. I found out about this on the Marketing AI podcast, or I think it's called the Artificial Intelligence Show now. But Notebook LM is fascinating. I have not played with it yet, but I'm really excited to do so. What you do is you take a very dense document. So for example, let's say there's a 50-page RFP from the US Department of Agriculture. You would upload the document to Notebook, and then within, I think, a few minutes, you basically have an ESPN style human sounding, and again, you can debate the ethics of this, but hear me out. Human sounding, basically two people discussing the content of the document. And so you're basically creating a play-by-play, like a sports cast of the document. So you're quickly catching up. And if I understand correctly, I think you can then start to ask specific questions, sort of like you can do with, other AI tools, like tell me about this, or tell me about, like, what's the cap on the dollar amount of this grant. You could start actually engaging it with that and get real-time feedback in audio, like you're having a conversation. So again, it sounds mind-blowing. You'll have to let me know what you think. I'll do the same on my end. But again, Notebook LM, check that out. It's not on the PDF or the PowerPoint here, but sounds like it's worth exploring. Okay. Next box, speeding up templated email responses. So I was blown away. There's a business consultant named Jonathan Stark. I found out about this from one of his clients. But there's a category of technology that you can embed into, your Chrome internet browser or other browsers you use called a text expander. And the purpose of a text expander is to take routine emails or routine types of text that you type again and again, right? So, hello, we'd like to invite you to be a speaker for this event. Click this link to register. Fill out this survey to let us know a little bit about you. Or, hey, I'm this entity. I have a question. Could we set up time to talk about this grant opportunity with you, funder X? And basically within the text responder, you build pre-created templates for email text you send again and again and again. Then you create a text-based shortcut to go with it. So you might say /grants. And then when you go into your email and you say /grants, suddenly all of that templated text pops up on the screen for you, literally within, a fraction of a second. And so from there, you can modify the name of the person. You can make revisions based on, customizing it for the person you're contacting. But if any of you in extension tend to send dozens or hundreds of emails that have some of the same flavor or topics, I mean, text expanders have probably saved me, 6 to 10 hours a week. I mean, it's nuts. So again, I think I pay 20 to 30 bucks a year for TextBlaze. I've really enjoyed this specific tool, but there are many others you can try and experiment with. Filing and sharing passwords securely. Cybersecurity I know is hugely important and something that I've underinvested in. But 1Password has a really good reputation. There are other services like this, but basically it can keep track of your passwords so you're not storing it in your internet browser, which can be a security risk, right? Which jeopardizes your fundraising capacity, your access to all of your tools and documents. It also allows you to anonymously share logins with colleagues or others without divulging the password. So you are protecting your security, but you're also providing access to people you give permission to. So if you're working on jointly on projects and you need access to confidential documents or what have you, that can be a resource to consider. I'm still learning the ropes. I do think it has a bit of a learning curve. But again, something to consider, and maybe something at the enterprise level that your university invests in. Feed your mind. There's Audible, obviously. Chirp is one that my wife actually introduced me to. If you're familiar with BookBub, which makes book recommendations and low-cost ebooks, Chirp is a great app on your phone. It also has a desktop website, but great for getting audiobooks. Actually, I found it more cost-effective and more user-friendly than Audible. Again, that's my personal experience. I'm not getting paid by Chirp, but I definitely love the ability to keep learning going via app. Okay, experimenting with AI efficiencies. I won't go into this in detail because I've talked about all of these in a previous workshop. So as Melanie said, go check out YouTube. Um, but definitely consider again ways to benefit from these incredible tools that are continuing to have new capabilities. Um, managing projects with peace of mind. I think project management, having a dedicated person, whether that's you or someone else, can be important. These are the kinds of tools like Asana I've used, Monday and Trello I've played around with as well. I actually continue to default back to Google Sheets or Excel just because it requires minimal training and it helps me for the purposes of my business keep it organized. But something like that just to make sure that you are able to have sort of repeatable systems, you know where to find documents, etc. And then lots of apps for keeping track of daily tasks. My favorite currently is Remember the Milk, both on my phone and desktop. I like the friendly animations. I like the ability to prioritize tasks and rank them, and add subtasks as well. That was a big one, right? Embed URLs and things that I don't want to forget about for later. So very, very quick run through, but those are some things that I think may be helpful to all of you in extension. So with that, that's a ton of information, and I apologize. I'm going to take a drink. I would love it if you could first fill out the form from Melanie in the chat with the extension survey. That would be fantastic, just to give feedback to the Extension Foundation team. That would be so helpful. And then once you've done that, if you don't mind giving me some feedback as a speaker today, I would be really, really grateful. And when we come back, we're going to go into our Q&A session. And I'm going to read some comments about other tools you all are recommending. So go ahead and do the surveys, and go ahead and start sending in those questions or comments in the chat. And Melanie and I will get to as many of those as we can here in the next 30 seconds or so. All right. Well, thank you all so much for sticking around and being here. And thank you for filling out those surveys. That's super helpful insights for Extension Foundation and myself. So let's start with some comments in the chat, and then we'll see if Melanie has spotted any questions to maybe dive into or other helpful ideas that folks have shared. Lillian mentions Bitwarden being a good resource for file and sharing passwords, and you can have a free version with the most common tools. That's awesome. That's one I have not checked out, Lillian. Thank you for sharing that. Molly recommends Blinkist as a great Cliff Notes and Audible form. Awesome. I will check that out as well. Thank you, Molly. That sounds awesome. Oh, Melanie, Spotify has greatly expanded their free audiobook section. Also, the Libby app. Ooh, I need to check that out. It's a great way to rent digital books and audiobooks through your local library. I can find almost any book and audiobook at my library. I love that. I need to tap into that. That would be a great resource, Melanie. Thank you. Great. Well, Melanie, let me pause here and ask, have you spotted any questions or any thoughts that are coming to mind as we enter our Q&A period that you'd like to share?
Sorry, I was having trouble with my mouse there.
No worries.
Yeah, a question just came through. Will you be emailing a list of the books you mentioned? Yes, I think that would be so. Well, we always email the slides, but I think it would be good for us to round up what has been suggested in the chat as well as the slides so everyone can access that. Because I know there's been a lot thrown to us today.
Yes, absolutely. And Melanie, just keep me posted on how I can support you all in doing that. But yes, happy to work with you all. As Melanie said, she'll have the slides to share, and then we'll try to round up all the great comments today and make sure all of your recommendations, books, tools, practical words of wisdom are all shared. So love that question, and thank you for asking. Anything else, Melanie, that jumped out to you?
Crystal just said Microsoft Word has a read aloud through the review tab. I was not aware of that. That's awesome.
Yeah, agreed, Melanie. Crystal, thank you for sharing that. That's awesome. And I think I actually maybe have used that once or twice, and yet that's a great function, and that's really good to know. Thank you for sharing that. Um, I'm trying to think of anything else as we're sort of sitting here, and if anyone has questions or comments they'd like to offer. Again, I know today's focus was a lot on professional development and learning yourself and so on. Um, so, but at any rate, I was trying to think if there was anything else that I'd been looking at or reading that might be beneficial to this group. Um, Nothing comes to mind immediately, but certainly if I think of anything else, I'll pass those along to Melanie to share with the group.
I have one more thing to plug. It was crucial conversations was mentioned today, and Carl Bradley, who works for the Extension Foundation, and he does leadership and team development. He actually hosts twice a year crucial conversations, and then also by the same people. It's called Crucial Influence, which is a new offering this year. But he hosts both of those each year, and you can learn more about that and sign up in the leadership link that I just put in the chat. So if anyone was interested in that, I encourage you to look at what Carl offers for the rest of this year.
I love that, Melanie. Thank you for sharing that. And yeah, if you've ever had the privilege of being in the room virtually, or I've only been virtually with Carl, I hope to meet him in person one of these days. But really, really impressive, talented servant leader. And that would be, I imagine that's going to be a tremendous resource. So definitely sign up for that. Carl is uh, full of wisdom, and that training sounds amazing. So thank you for raising that, Melanie, and dropping that into the chat, both for crucial conversations as well as crucial influence. That's new to me, and I'm going to look that up. That's awesome. Well, not seeing any questions, which is totally fine. I know it's a very busy time, and you all have been so attentive and patient and participatory. I appreciate that. I guess the last thing I'll say as we close out this series of webinars and look to the future, just continue to invest in yourself, right? Invest in your team, invest in your leadership, but don't forget that a big part of the fundraising journey, the mark of someone who's successful at securing the financial capital to keep going are those who are learning, who are creative, who are passionate, who are curious. And so I hope those are skills and traits that we've emphasized a lot through this series. I see those things in spades and extension, and it can be so easy to get caught up in the work without sort of stepping back and seeing the bigger picture. So I'm grateful for the ideas and the insights you've shared with me. It's been a pleasure to work with all of you in extension, and I truly look forward to collaborating in the future. So with that, I'm going to give you back a few minutes of your day. Melanie, thank you and the Extension Foundation team for all that you do. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Yes, thank you so much, Nate. This was such a great session, so much to dive into. I hope everyone enjoys the rest of their Thursday. And again, I'll be sending out all the resources in an email early next week. So you can be looking forward to that. And also, please go back and check out all of Nate's sessions if you missed any, and also the slides. There's so many resources in there as well. So thank you so much for joining us today, and we'll see you guys next time.